Hey everybody, this is Kara Crossway Brindle, co-founder of the Empowerment Model of Clinical Supervision. Welcome back to another video of the Stellar Supervision series. Yay! We talk about all things clinical supervision in this series. And our special guest today is Stephanie. I've actually asked Stephanie to come on because we're going to talk about Supervisee imposter syndrome. And she has a little story that illustrates how to navigate this and hopefully navigate it well. Stephanie, it's nice to have you here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You want to tell people who you are and what you do real quick?
So, my name is Stephanie Contrahera. I'm a licensed professional counselor as well as a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, the state of Colorado. I have a group practice here in Colorado and starting one in Florida, and I supervise about 4 people right now and have other supervisors on my team that I also supervise. So, I'm thick in the thick of it when it comes to supervising.
Yeah, you're doing the upper leadership level and the unlicensed folks or interns or whatnot, because I know you've done both. So
Yes.
I'm happy to have you here because I know there was a scenario that you and I talked about offline that we want to talk about today, which is supervising imposter syndrome and what the heck that even looks like. So you want to share a little bit of what you've noticed with people?
Yeah, I tend to have very new clinicians, like straight either still in grad school or straight out of grad school. So literally first hours they're starting to track. And oftentimes I hear things about like, I don't know if I know what to do with this client, or I'm feeling like this client ghosted me. So now I'm a bad therapist. And I hear a variety of things that come up pretty regularly. And I think that the biggest thing comes from an outpatient specifically. They're not coming to my appointments, right? They want to cancel. They skipped it. They no showed it, and then that creating a sense of like, oh, they must not really like me, or I must not be doing a great job, or there's something wrong with me that they, suddenly are no longer interested in
Mm-hmm.
receiving therapy from me.
Yeah, that's so tough because they already don't feel completely confident. They're new in the field and they're saying this to you in supervision, I imagine. Not to mention sometimes even just having to self identify as, hey, I'm an intern or I'm a new grad or I'm under the supervision of Stephanie or somebody else. Some of our clients do choose not to work with them because of that, which is unfortunate because there could be a really quality clinician, especially with quality supervision.
Yeah, I hear it a lot, especially from interns or LPCCs that supervise people that would identify as professionals. There seems to be this like struggle of like, oh, well, they're like already in their field and being successful. And I feel like they're staring at me, like waiting for me to do some sort of like magic trick that's gonna heal all of their problems, and
So
then it's like,
I feel
well,
like you said that nicely. Like a driven professional is what I'm hearing. Like somebody who's like really like put together, high functioning, adds pressure to the clinician to do well. Is that what you're saying?
yes, yeah, I think when the therapist gets this vibe that somehow they're not giving deliverables to
Mm,
the professional or the high achieving professional, it creates an even larger shift of this imposter syndrome compared to maybe some other people.
yeah.
Also, age sometimes I feel like plays a role in a clinician's ability to not feel like an imposter. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I would say that also plays a role. I have a wide variety, like people who even have chosen to be a therapist as a second career and brand new therapist. And both of them I've witnessed experiencing imposter syndromes and in different ways. Um, One, I think it's interesting when it's like a second career because sometimes the clinician feels like, oh, they're giving me this trust because they see that I'm a little bit older and think that I'm more experienced. And I'm really not that experienced. I'm just as new as this 25-year-old like clinician. And I don't know if I can like meet this trust level. And then on the other hand, oh, you're really young. Like, what do you know? Is like the messages again that my clinicians come and tell me is the thoughts that they're having that potentially the client is having about them.
Right. Absolutely. And I feel like our viewers can resonate with this because even if you're not a green clinician or a second career clinician, I think clients can say and do things that just bring this up because we're always growing, we're always learning. I mean, there's things that clients continue to challenge us on so that we continue to grow. And that might just imposter syndrome's ugly head, actually.
Yes, or like even as an established clinician suddenly hears something from a client that they've never, come up against before in session and be like, oh, how do I handle this? I know I've even experienced that and had to contact other clinicians in the field and be like, wait a second, like, what am I supposed to, how am I supposed to help this person? What is the right thing to do here? And so I think it comes up at any stage of being a therapist, but I would imagine the greener the therapist, the more frequently it probably comes up because they don't have that like tool belt or evidence that they can prove to themselves that they've
Right.
been successful in the past.
Right, because I think sometimes this comes with time and experience, and so I love how you've kind of given some visuals of what to look for. What other things might you see in a supervisee to be like, they might be experiencing imposter syndrome, even if they're not naming it? What kinds of things do you hear or see from them to be like, this could be something to talk about?
I think they tend to start saying like, oh, I don't know if I want to see this population anymore. Like suddenly it's uncomfortable for me to work with this population, when in the beginning they might have been really excited to work with that population. Another thing is they maybe stop wanting to take on new clients and just stick with the ones that they already have established, even though they might have spaces on their caseload to accept new clients. I would also say like just seeing how they appear in supervision and in group supervision, if they're really quiet, if they're maybe using language that to me sounds like they're doubting themselves, like, I don't know if this is right, or maybe I should be doing this. I don't know. Like that uncertainty, I think, is another thing.
Absolutely. Even just body language. I can imagine if they're like kind of curled in on themselves or not giving eye contact to the group supervision participants or to the supervisor, that could also be a flag.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, my only other thought is if they decide that they no longer want to do maybe what's a good word, like challenging clients, like suddenly like, oh, this client's becoming like too challenging, can I like
Yeah.
refer them to somebody else, even though it is potentially within their scope. Something maybe happened in the session that was awkward or uncomfortable, or the client shared something with them that they weren't anticipating, and now suddenly it's like, oh, I don't know if I can manage this. And it's like, I think you can, based on these other experiences that I've
Right.
seen you manage, and what's different about this one. So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think those are different ways that it shows up when they don't necessarily say like, I'm feeling like I'm not sure what I'm doing and I'm like, and I'm an imposter.
Yeah. So for supervisors who are watching this video and like, okay, I recognize that's happening. I've got green clinicians or interns or folks that are coming in for supervision and we're hearing that kind of language, that body language. What are some ideas you have for them as a supervisor to support that supervisee who's kind of spiraling out in imposter syndrome?
I think it's really important to provide safety in the relationship between you and your supervisee, letting them know that they could talk about these things in group supervision and in individual supervision, and that it's normalizing it for them and validating their concerns. I also offer at my practice and encourage them to get as much training as they feel like they need, whether that's, let's do something in group supervision or in a team meeting, or going outside of the practice and getting a training that will help them feel more competent, reassuring them that they do have skills and that they've been successful with other clients and have been able to facilitate growth and change in other clients, and that that's not that different with this specific experience that they're now having, and that it will come and go. And I think that's something that I talk about a lot with people. And
Yeah.
I really like to come from a strengths-based approach when it comes to helping them figure out like, okay, what do you already think you're doing well? And reminding them of that.
Yeah, and kind of like just getting them out of that negative thought pattern by saying, let's talk about a success story. Let's think of a client you've done really well with, just to keep it in balance, right? So it's not all everything is awful.
Yes,
But there's
exactly.
something as evidence that says, actually, I did really well with this other client. I love that. I think also a lot of us are looking at like concrete evaluations that we do with our supervisees. I know for interns, they're required to do them with school. But even for green clinicians, they might value that concrete tool to say, this is where I think you land. Because you and I've talked before about how supervisees underreport their skills. That's just naturally what shows up is they always say, I'm doing okay. They're never saying I'm doing stellar, which is probably okay and appropriate. But the underreporting can also probably be a sign of some imposter syndrome of like, oh, I don't feel competent. That could be a flag.
Yeah, I like to do also case conceptualizations as part of my supervision like program, as well as like reviewing tapes, that's an old word, videos of my supervisees. And in those, when I review them both privately as well as with the clinician, I really try to point out all of their things that they've done well. And yeah, I think it's really important to focus on people's strengths, because the more confident that they'll feel, the more excited they'll feel about learning new things and, being their best selves for their clients.
Absolutely. I think the other thing to name from our conversation today is the countertransference transference dance that happens. So that might also be why they're coming in saying, I can't work with this client because they're triggering, or they remind them of someone, or they've now taken on the role of, the antagonist in the client's life. So for all our viewers, you all are well versed in hopefully transference and countertransference, which can also lead to some imposter syndrome, I think. What do you think, Stephanie?
Yeah, I think I've had quite a few not clients. I've had quite a few supervisees mention that they have clients that remind them of like their mother, or their brother, or a friend, and trying to help them figure out how they can work with that, rather than have it be a hindrance. I think even just identifying it and saying it out loud and having a conversation about it is really important. I oftentimes will find, like, if they're really uneasy about working with someone, I usually ask them, what is it about this person that makes it really difficult? If they
Absolutely.
didn't already label the countertransference that's happening.
Yeah. I love that because that's curiosity, right? That's one of the values of supervisors, of like coming at all these things with curiosity and compassion and zero judgment, because we're just here to help them grow and change as clinicians, into their professional selves. And so just asking that question, I think, is so powerful. Like, what is it about this person? Is it something that they remind you of someone? Is it a mannerism? Is it that you feel like you have nothing in common? Like, what is the fear that's making it feel like there's distance between you and your client? Um, I know you mentioned something about normalizing, so I wanted to name for our viewers. Like, I also go about normalizing, like, you're not a fit for everyone. And so when a client fires you or ghosts you or calls your supervisor and says, I want someone else, doesn't really have a reason why. I want to, for the viewers, I want to normalize like that will happen at some point in your career. In fact, I've had clients who have named that there's like an article online that they Googled of how to fire your therapist, which is very humorous to me. And so I'll probably talk about that in another video, but these are things that we can help green clinicians or interns recognize of, like, eventually we hope that they can feel empowered to not be a fit for everyone, because that's actually a red flag for me as a professional. If we say I can work with everyone, like, I think there's a reason we have specialties, and it's because we do really quality work in certain arenas.
Yeah, I think it's really important to highlight too with the therapist what I've seen going well. Like, I have a clinician on my team who was really struggling working with teens, even though she really wanted to. But she was excelling in this other area she didn't expect to, which was like substance abuse and men. And I was like, I know you really want to work with teens, but it seems like this is going like really well for you. Maybe it's important to like harvest this skill, and then you could still try to work with teens, even if that's something that you're really interested in. But playing to your
Right.
strength, I think, is super important for new clinicians.
Build that confidence. Well, Stephanie, I feel like this has been super helpful, and I know a lot of people will have questions based on what we've talked about today. So if they wanted to reach out to you, where would they find you?
Well, my website is wellmindedcounseling.com. That has like everything that I'm doing, everything that our team is doing. I am also on Instagram at wellmindedcounseling.com and Facebook with Well-Minded Counseling as well. And you can email me directly if you're interested, hello@wellmindedcounseling.com. It's hard to miss me if you know wellmindedcounseling.com.
Perfect. I love the consistency. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for your wisdom and how you stay in that strengths-based place with supervisees. I feel like this is going to be super helpful for anyone who's working with clinicians with imposter syndrome. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to see the rest of the series.
Absolutely. Well, viewers, stay tuned for more videos. We'll see you next time.